How has technology helped you build a strong foundation? Obviously would love to hear about Prism as being a part of
Yeah.
that, but also other platforms as well.
Yeah. I mean, we've always been really, I think to the extent that a company of our size and scope can be, we've always been really technology focused. So I think unlike a lot of people in our world, we look at something like the ticketing platform, for instance, as being uh, far beyond just this is where you sell your tickets. We look at that as a data platform, as a marketing platform, as something that helps you understand your business with much greater clarity. Um, and that was something that I think we were really unusual in terms of the fact that when you looked at our staff, I was really insistent that when we talked about the ticketing, that people within the company that wouldn't normally have a huge relationship with the ticketing did, because we said, okay, those things, the reports that we can pull out, the data we can extract, all those things are things that help you in a 360-degree sense of your business. When it came to something like Prism, pre-pandemic, we were working in spreadsheets and we were working with, multiple bookers that all had the kind of singular file sitting on their computer and, a shared calendar, but that was about as far as it went. And one of the things that we did during the pandemic was once it was really clear that shows weren't going to start for a while and, rebooking and rescheduling and all that kind of, madness that took place where you're kicking shows for the fifth or sixth time out to some imaginary time period where things would restart. And we said, okay, everybody pump the brakes and we're going to huddle and we're going to talk about what are the problems within our company. And the big thing we identified was, this sort of like, what is the central mode of communication? What is the central communication hub? What is the central information storage? And we'd used, different solutions over the years, but it was all kind of spread out and kind of patched together. And we sat down first and said, without even looking at something like Prism, and said, well, what are the elements of something that can help us with greater levels of communication, greater levels of efficiency, and that kind of thing. And it really came down to, look, it's something really simple. We need to all be looking at the same information. It needs to be kind of live. It needs to be some level of a custom view so that the view that my marketing department sees versus the view that my catering department sees has to be different. And the way that they're going to use some kind of a central platform would be different. And we went to the step of exploring designing software and all that sort of thing. And then somebody in our office said, hey, have you guys looked at Prism? And we looked at it and, Matt, I'm going to say, a huge compliment here on one hand. And then, true realities of it is that I looked at it and I said, this is outstanding. We can really literally take this and say, okay, this starts with the dates, it starts with the offer and everything distributes from there. It's this beautiful central, hub of truth, this central hub of all information. It all lives here and everybody's got their own customized way that they see it. And so on its face, that's an incredible achievement. And for us, it has been an outstanding, way to make things much more efficient. We went through the, step of really doing in-depth trainings and that sort of thing. And your team was really great about that. Specifically, Rosie spent many hours with our people. And I think it was really important that everybody was on the same page. How are we going to use this? What's this going to look like? The thing that is unavoidable with a platform like Prism is that it aspires to do so many things and it aspires to address so many areas in a really complex business, is that when you come across something that it can't do or is not necessarily an intuitive path to how you and your brain think it should be. And as a non-computer programmer, you go, well, just change it. It can get frustrating. It's like, well, okay, our production manager goes, I've been doing my advance this way for 30 years, and this is how it's going to go. And why doesn't it look exactly like my advance? And so there's a learning curve there. And there's also a little bit of expectation setting from the technology that say, okay, let's appreciate, the broad objective of what this is trying to do. And let's really appreciate the fact that in many cases, it's extremely successful at that. But nobody is going to build something right out of the box that's successful at every single thing that it tries to achieve. And if they did, it would be so insanely expensive and overdeveloped that nobody would be able to afford it. And you'd probably need to change it, within 2 days to catch up to, emerging industry trends, right? I mean, we talk about a lot of these things with the differences in how revenue flows, or the differences in how we address expenses, how we address different kinds of deals. And so that has been something that, I'm very appreciative for a flexible platform and how it's all gone.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think the little bit of constructive feedback you put in there, or realism, as you put it, with like the profound compliment. I see it all as a profound compliment, honestly. Software is just an amazing game of give and take. It's really hard to build software. You're building bricks and structures, and it's a lot of, like finding people that, can see that you've done something absolutely perfectly. And then if there's a certain piece of the application that they need to kind of bend around, like it requires that. And some people get that really well, and other people don't. And then, folks that don't, you hope that they can deliver feedback that in a sensible way, that that patient feedback, and allow us to adopt. And frankly, that's a lot of the way that Prism has changed over the years. And yeah, I mean, when you walked into Prism, we had gone through a few years of doing that with a growing group of promoters, and I've appreciated your organization for delivering a ton of feedback, and I know we've been able to act on a lot of it as well, and it's ongoing. And the person who walks into Prism 8 years from now, God willing, is going to get a much better experience. And I'm just going to keep that going. And ideally, software systems do continue to grow and expand. Yeah, and further kind of fit the mold of the challenge. It's like a guitar that starts off as a tree mostly, right, and then over time it becomes more and more of a guitar. That's what we're trying to do with Prism.
Well, we have a really squirrely industry too, and people do things in a lot. I mean, that was one of the things I was most impressed with when you say, okay, I'm writing offers here, and I've seen other offer writing platforms, and it's like some of it is like pretty scary and pretty limited. And the fact is that I had after seeing the way that some of the other offer writing software had functioned, seeing one that had some just little intelligent, intuitive things that got you from A to B in a relatively elegant fashion was a real breath of fresh air. And the fact that, okay, we can tie this into, disseminating all of this information, or, using it as a great day-to-day tool, that I think that for us was, because it's one thing to say, okay, we're going to make this financial investment in the software. It's another to say, we're going to trust the day-to-day of our business in a big way with the software. And so to me, that's the much larger step that, from a, kind of intellectual standpoint, as a business operator, you have to make that decision. We're moving from these systems that are very imperfect, but everybody has at least functioned with and been comfortable with over the years, to something that is, a little new and a little scary, and you're kind of in some ways handing the keys over. So it has to be good.
Yeah. So speaking of like adopting to your day-to-day process, we recently launched CoPro, which you gave us a ton of great feedback on. And obviously there's much more that we want to be able to do with it, but curious to talk through, what that experience was like, and seeing it come to life, and how it's, what kind of problems it's solving for you.
Well, it's one
better.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's one of the most complex, issues you can deal with, as far as, starting a show, settling a show, all these different considerations. And as you guys have pointed out, the current platform is kind of an mediary step between, I think, what the eventual realization of the whole thing is. But I've been very pleased with the ability to look at it and say, okay, this really does address and clean up a lot of the issues that dealt with settling a co-pro in the past or writing a co-pro in the past, which, with a platform like Prism, in the absence of co-pro, you're ultimately doing two sets of books there that opens you up to all kinds of error and that kind of thing. And that, the new co-pro platform has really reduced the amount of entry, reduced the amount of error, and sped the process up quite significantly. And it contemplated a lot of the little things about co-pro that it needed to. So, I'm sure that there were a lot of, as you guys had a larger growing client list, there was, I'm sure, a lot of demand for it because it's such a common, deal point. But making sure that in the first place, the platform that came out was well thought out was really important. And I think you guys have achieved that.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. If there's anything else that if there's any other bird's eye view, achievements that Prism has helped you unlock with your business, feel free to share. And I've also appreciated our conversations, on the ticketing side. And there's a few things that you've mentioned to me technology wise that that I've learned through our conversations that are like really important on the technology side. And platinum ticketing, I think, is one thing that's extremely, valuable to you. So yeah, if you could just end with like a nutshell of like what you're seeing important trends that you're seeing in terms of building that brick house in technology, whether it's something like Prism and the features inside of ticketing that are innovative, that are on the cutting edge, that I know that you need for your business, that would be really appreciated to hear.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're looking at all of these as, how do we keep up with the current trends? And if you would have asked somebody 10 years ago if things like platinum ticketing would be nearly as important as it is now, I think that would be a real surprise to see the level of importance it's taken on, within the industry. I think that the big thing that we need to think about all these platforms is these are incredible centers of data for the promoter and incredible centers of data for the user. So when you look at ticketing and you look at things like Prism and all of these things that we've accumulated over the years, it really does get into, well, okay, how do we organize that data in more intelligent ways? How do we use it to reach the consumer more efficiently? How do we use it to make greater decisions day to day about what we're going to do, whether it is, how we're paying an artist, how is the show performing, what should we be doing from a macro level with our business? I mean, one of the great things about Prism that I think we haven't really even touched on is the ability to not just exist with it at the show level, but zoom way out and say, how is the business doing at large? You'd never use it to replace accounting software or anything like that, but Prism has some very unique elements to it where we can drill down to certain types of data, whether it's groups of performers or venues or whatever, and learn some things about our business that typically wouldn't have been within the realm of understanding. And I think that's the long-term conversation for me is how do those kinds of systems that you have at the venue level, that you're sitting in front of your kind of command center, how does that tie into things like the ticketing, and how does it dispel some of the assumptions that we've made about the consumer, dispel some of the assumptions that we've made about various points of deal structures and that sort of things. That to me is kind of the the holy grail of it. How do we get closer and tie all those things in together and have more distilled sort of abbreviated versions of understanding the breadth and depth of our data?
Got it. Well, thank you so much. We're just rounding the corner
Yeah.
on an hour and a half here, which is about all I asked you for. And you've been
Yeah.
very gracious with your time, and I appreciate it a lot. Not just in this conversation, but in the couple of years that we've known each other. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for having you on. I appreciate your time, and yeah, if you have any closing thoughts, please feel free. But
No, man,
thank you.
I always enjoy talking to you. You're a fellow
Yeah,
nerd like me, and
indeed.
so I don't do a ton of talking, but I always enjoy a good conversation with you. So I thank you for that.
Yeah, our first conversation was about that. There's an Israeli scientist that found like an object floating through the universe, and
Oumuamua or whatever. Yeah,
yeah, the
the
Mumu,
space junk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which I still, when I'm not building concert software, I'm looking into that kind of stuff. So that was how we first connected, and
got to keep your eye in the sky. That's it.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Matt. Appreciate it.
All right, take care. Bye bye.